is Frieda and welcome to my kitchen. Today, let's talk about making sugar cookies. There are two kinds of sugar cookies. One are the kind that are thin, crispy, and buttery, and the other are the super soft sugar cookies. I have been making this recipe ever since I was old enough to hold a rolling pin. So let's talk about the tips and secrets that you can do to make these super soft sugar cookie recipe in your kitchen. Sugar cookies are not just for Valentine's Day or for Christmas. You can enjoy sugar cookies all year round. You really don't need an excuse to enjoy a soft sugar cookie, do you? Well, think of the birthdays, anniversaries, 4th of July, family reunion, just about any special occasion or gathering you can think of, there is a sugar cookie shape designed for it. Okay, when measuring the shortening, I make sure that it's packed in tight with no significant air bubbles, and smooth it off. Then I use the flat edge of my knife, score it around a couple of times, and knock it out, and it pretty much cleans out the entire measuring cup. Okay. Next is to add my sugar. Just level it off. And add my attachment and mix it on speed 2. You want to scrape down the sides and make sure shortening sugar completely. This still looks a little chunky. You want it to be very, very creamed. Okay, the shortening looks very well mixed in with the sugar and is very creamy. Crack on a flat surface, and you can see how nice and straight that line is. No little bits of cracked egg. Then I like to add a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of baking powder, and a teaspoon of baking soda, and my vanilla. You'll want to mix it in completely. You can see there's chunks of shortening here. You'll want to scrape that down into the mixture and also scrape down the sides of your bowl and also the bottom where there's a little dimple in the bowl there that tends to catch a little bit of shortening. You don't want any lumps of the sugar shortening mixture in your cookies because they cook really weird. So let's give this another spin. Okay, that's looking much, much better. Very smooth, very creamy. That's exactly what you want. Okay, next is to alternate my milk and my flour. This is all-purpose flour, so I will start it, and you can watch me alternate it back and forth. When it gets down to the last 2 cups of flour, you will want to put in a little bit at a time, not the whole cup, otherwise the flour will just spray out of the mixer. Before adding the last cup of flour, it's a good idea to scrape the sides one last time and get any stray flour off of the beater. This is my last cup of flour. Don't want to overmix the dough too much. You can see how soft and sticky the dough is. You can see the consistency of the dough. This is where you want it to be. And store this in the fridge for about an hour to 2 hours. I like to do this overnight so my dough is thoroughly chilled. The reason you want to chill your dough is to make it easier to roll out. Hey, this is how I like to roll out my sugar cookies. This is a Silpat, which is a silicone nonstick baking sheet. And these are paint sticks from Home Depot or a hardware store. They are exactly 1/4 inch thick. So I put them on either side of my Silpat and line it with a dusting of flour. Then take my chilled cookie dough out. This is one batch of chilled cookie dough. Take a second to come out there. I like to cut it in half. Cut the cookie dough in half to fit and roll it into the flour. Since this is taking up a little bit of flour, I like to add a little bit more flour. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. You don't want to add too much flour to this cookie dough because the more flour you put in it and the more you work with it, the tougher your cookies will be. So this is my favorite rolling pin. It's a French rolling pin. And I just roll it out in the middle. If it starts to stick, I take a little bit more flour and coat the rolling pin and continue to roll this out in both directions, horizontally and vertically. Just put a little bit more flour on it if you notice that the dough is starting to stick. Just about there. All the way, you want to check and make sure that it's an even 1/4 inch thickness all the way. Perfect. Remove my paint sticks and choose a fun cookie shape. It's Christmas time, so these are the cookie shapes that I like to use. Make sure you press down firmly and cut out as many as you can. Okay, after my cookies have been cut out, I like to use the bottom of my cookie sheet. The reason I like to use the bottom of my cookie sheet is I use convection, and convection works better when there's no sides to your cookie sheet. If there's sides on your cookie sheet, then your cookies will brown a little bit more. Putting them on a flat cookie sheet or on the bottom of your cookie sheet helps brown your cookies more evenly. And how I transfer this is I just put this against my counter and lean on it and then slide the cookie dough on there. Then, here's the fun part. Just remove the excess of my cookie dough. After the excess cookie dough has been pulled away, you want to leave some room in between your cookies so they'll grow and expand. So I use a very thin metal spatula that you have to flour occasionally, and just kind of move my cookies into the spot that I want them to bake in. Dusting and moving until they are exactly where I want them. That looks great. These will go into a preheated 375-degree oven for 8 minutes, and then I will turn the cookie sheet around and cook it for another minute, and I will show you what they look like when they're done. Okay, these are the scraps from my 2 rolled out batches of cookie dough. I'm just going to lightly roll them together. You don't want to handle this too much, otherwise your cookie dough will get really tough. Kind of like pie dough. You don't want to handle it too much. So I'm going to lightly flour my surface and lightly flour my rolling pin, and repeat the same process. If you don't have a Silpat baking sheet, you can use a piece of parchment paper. Parchment paper is kind of slick, so I like to wet down my countertop and put the piece of parchment on there, and then I can re-roll some of my scraps here. After I take my cookies out of the oven, I like to keep them on the hot cookie sheet for about 5 minutes. They will continue to cook, and you can tell when they are done when they're just barely turned brown, and that when you touch them, it doesn't leave a dent. It's kind of like a cake. If you touch it and there's a dent in there, you still need another minute. So these are right hot out of the oven, barely even brown. I'm going to let them sit here for about 5 minutes and continue cooking, and then transfer them to a wire cooling rack. Okay, after your cookies have cooled for about 5 minutes, it will be time to transfer them onto a wire cooling rack. If you don't have a wire cooling rack, a clean kitchen towel or paper towels will do the trick. You do not want to let these completely cool on the hot rack, because then they'll start getting moist and soggy on the bottom. You want these to dry out and to cool completely on a cooling rack. After your sugar cookies have completely cooled, it will be time to frost them. I like these sugar cookies plain. They are not too overly sweet, but when you put frosting on them, it makes an exceptional cookie. I like to frost a cookie and let it sit in an airtight container overnight. What this does is allow the moisture from the frosting to make the cookie very soft. I remember as a child putting frosting on graham crackers or saltine crackers and then putting them in a sandwich bag, and overnight the crackers would be very soft. It's the same principle when you put the frosting on the cookie and let it sit overnight. So I hope you make this cookie in your kitchen, have fun frosting it, and enjoy.